Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you happen to be at the moment. My name is Joe Aronow. I'm the product specialist for the MX product line, and I want to talk to you today about using the MX in a K-12 environment and what the value is of the MX UTM clients in a K-12 education environment. So, before we get started with the nitty-gritty of what the MX features are that apply to this, and how to apply them, and how to deploy it, and all that good stuff, I want to do a quick introduction, talk about Cisco Meraki a little bit, and give you guys some kind of organizational information about the webinar. First things first, what everyone came here to see, free access points. So if you go to meraki.cisco.com/freeap, you can see details on eligibility for getting a free 3-year licensed access point for attending this webinar, which is always good. More free stuff is always a good thing. To confirm shipping information for your free device, call your Cisco Meraki rep or email them. You should have their contact info in the webinar reminder email. So, about Cisco Meraki, who are we, what do we do? Well, what we do is cloud managed networking. And it's important to talk about what we mean when we say cloud managed networking, because that's a very vague term to a lot of people. What we mean is we create wireless, switching, security, and MDM solutions, 3 hardware and 1 software. The MDM solution is a pure software solution that are all managed and monitored from a cloud dashboard that we provide. So you go to dashboard.meraki.com, you log into your dashboard account, you manage and monitor your devices from there. No need for local management, no need for SSH, Telnet, anything like that. You do everything from the web dashboard in a very easy to use, very intuitive GUI, and you can do it from anywhere in the world, right? All you need is internet access. Doesn't matter if you're on go in-flight Wi-Fi on a plane, if you're on your couch at home, doesn't matter if you're wearing pants, right? You can manage this stuff from anywhere. That's the beauty of it. So we have done very well, and I think a large part of that is response, positive response to that cloud management concept and to the ease of use of the product, right? Especially in certain key verticals like education, where the number of people managing a large network can be very small. You have to make your time go a long way. And one of the things that's great about Meraki is that the solution is so easy to use and the GUI is so intuitive that it's very easy to do that, right? One administrator can do a lot with this that they might not be able to do with a more complex solution because all of their time would be spent doing more manual configuration. So we are very successful in education. We've done very well ever since actually the inception of Meraki across all of our platforms, be it wireless, switching, or security. Obviously today I'm here to talk to you about security. Here are just a few of the great K-12 customers we have today. And there are a million more I could put on here, but these are some of my favorites. We're not going to talk too much about them specifically, but we will talk about some of their use cases and what they're doing with the product. So what is the core concept here? What's the value of the Meraki Cloud Managed solution at a little bit more granular level? Well, one of the great things about this is it's fully secure. Your connection from the device to the cloud is secure. Your connection to the cloud controller when you're going in and doing configuration changes is secure because it's all SSL encrypted. There's no user data going through the cloud. That's an important distinction to make because obviously for security and compliance reasons, it would be problematic if all of your traffic was passing through our cloud. That would add a lot of kind of security concerns, but it doesn't. Your data passes out onto the network or out onto the internet just as it would with any other device. The only thing going between the devices and our cloud is command and control traffic, management and monitoring data. And that's the kind of stuff, the monitoring is the kind of stuff you see when you log into the dashboard and look at traffic statistics and things like that. And obviously the management is you going in and making configuration changes. We do constant security testing, penetration testing. We are fully HIPAA and PCI level 1 certified on the cloud side. And one of the other great things about this is that it scales very, very well because the cloud backend is designed specifically to scale, and you don't have to worry so much about scalability on site because you're not dealing with on-site controllers or devices that can really be very easily outgrown from a management perspective. You're dealing with one management interface that can manage as many devices as you need it to. It's also very, very quick and easy to deploy new devices, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We have a 4.9 SLA that we've never violated, and if you happen to lose connectivity to the cloud controller, which is actually fairly difficult to do because we have redundancy both within data centers and between multiple data centers, if you happen to lose connectivity, your devices will continue to operate on the last known good configuration, they'll continue to pass traffic, and they'll actually cache analytics data, the stuff that's shown in the dashboard to you as kind of monitoring information locally so that when they reconnect to dashboard, they can send that up and backfill that period, so you don't have this big gray section of a chart or something that says, well, for this hour, we had no data because we were disconnected from the clock, right? So why Cisco Meraki? Well, one of the big things is that centralized management. Like I said, in environments where you have a very small, dedicated team of heavily taxed IT professionals running the network, which is very common in education, having that easy-to-use GUI, that central management, the ability to manage all of your devices, even across platforms, right, managing security, switching, and wireless and MDM all from one place is phenomenally powerful. There's also a very kind of easy learning curve on this stuff. It's very easy to pick it up, and once you've picked up one of the platforms, let's say you're already familiar with Meraki Wireless and you want to start using MX for security, there's really very little training required because it's one unified UI and it's consistent across products. So if you know how to manage one Meraki product and dashboard, it's very easy to pick up the others. It's just different menu options in a very similar UI. The other thing is that you're managing your whole organization, your whole device structure, as opposed to each device individually, which is a big deal when you've got a lot of devices to manage, or even just a few devices to manage. Rather than going into each one individually and making changes, you're managing them all in one place. And I think any network admin would agree, one central point of management is always better than 10, 15, 100, 1,000 different places that you have to go to accomplish all the things you need to do in the network on a day-to-day basis. It's also a very flexible solution in that we provide a lot of monitoring and troubleshooting capability in dashboard that normally you might have to have a third-party solution in place for, something like a SolarWinds tool, right, to gather, traffic analytics data, or some kind of NetFlow tool to gather analytics and traffic patterns. You can do a lot of that in the dashboard itself. You can see device status, you can see traffic information, you can see security reporting, right? It's all built into the UI that you use to manage the devices. So again, that single pane of glass, that one central point where you're touching all of these devices. Provisioning is arguably, I would say, one of the best features of the Meraki platform as a whole, because as opposed to having to make a bunch of manual changes locally, or even if you're dealing with a situation where you're just trying to get some kind of SSH terminal or management terminal up on the device so that you can then manage it remotely, it adds a fair amount of extra grunt work, right, to deploying these devices, especially if you're deploying them to a satellite campus or to somewhere that's not necessarily right there where the IT team is. So the beauty of this with Meraki is that it's all done from the cloud, right? All you need is an internet connection. So worst case scenario, somebody on site goes to a local page that's built into the MX, they set a static IP to get it connected to the network, and then from there, everything's done via the cloud. So it can all be done remotely. Even better, if you're using DHCP, you don't even need to do that, right? You just have someone plug it in, and you can manage that along with all the rest of your devices from the cloud at that point. We've also got, as I mentioned, a fair amount of kind of traffic analytics data built into this, layer 7 application visibility and control data that's built into a dashboard that can be searched, can be viewed in a variety of different ways, and is all presented to you in that same dashboard UI. We also have content filtering on the MX with the advanced security license that allows you to do category-based web filtering, which obviously is crucial in education because of CIPA compliance. So the MX, what is the MX? What does it do? What's it there for? Where does it sit in the market? Well, it's what's called a UTM, or Unified Threat Management device. And what we mean by that is it's basically a firewall with a lot of other kind of security and connectivity-centric features. So it's well past the kind of capabilities of a traditional firewall, has a lot of other features built into it. On the right, you can see an example of some of these features, certainly not all by any means, but it's a good kind of cross-section. So you have layer 7 next generation firewalling, client and site-to-site VPN, intrusion detection and prevention. You actually also have edge malware scanning on the security side as well. It's not mentioned in this slide, but it's built into the MX, uses Kaspersky, which is a very well-known and trusted service company. On the networking side, you have 3G, 4G backup via USB modems. If you have a connection at a site that you're not sure you trust, like a cable connection or a business connection that's not particularly trustworthy, it has obviously the basic NAT, DHCP, static routing capabilities, and it also has uplink balancing and aggregation. So you can have 2 wired uplinks on any of the MX devices, and you can split your traffic between them, either manually or with an automatic load balancing algorithm to say, okay, I want to use both of these links, and I want to send traffic across them in whatever way I see fit. So how does this apply to education security? Well, as we said, it's incredibly easy to deploy. So if you have a distributed campus or you have multiple schools that you're managing via a service organization that's covering, an entire district or multiple districts, as is the case in many parts of the U.S. certainly and elsewhere, it's really incredibly powerful to be able to just send this on site to someone to just plug it in and have it go, right? Once you get that up and you're into the dashboard, even the dashboard configuration itself, doing these configuration tasks is very, very easy compared to a lot of other solutions. Probably the best example of this is the site-to-site VPN. Our site-to-site VPN is called Auto VPN, and it's a phenomenally easy way to configure and manage site-to-site VPN because it's all cloud brokered. And we'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. We'll do a quick demo, and I'll show you what Auto VPN looks like in the dashboard, and we'll get into kind of what it is, what's the value, how does it work as well. Another great feature for this is a feature called configuration templates, where you can actually create a templated configuration, as the name implies, and you can attach various devices, various networks to that configuration, and they will share that one configuration. So if you've got a series of locations or a series of devices that should all be sharing one shared configuration, you can create that once. You can apply that template to all these devices, and then when you make a change on the template, it's automatically propagated to all the devices that are bound to that template. Another big one, if you've got an MPLS deployment of some kind, is we offer this MPLS to VPN failover feature. What that does is when you have an MPLS route, a route across the MPLS to a particular remote subnet, whether it's some central resource or it's some education partner, if you have a route over the MPLS and then you also have a backup route that's an IPsec VPN route using this Auto VPN technology, we can automatically fail over to the VPN if the MPLS goes down. So you maintain your security, you maintain connectivity, and everyone's still able to access that resource. I already went into a little bit the ease of use, but one great sort of example, analogy, or just quick example of this is we have a training that we do for partners that's called CMNA. And CMNA is a one-day intensive course where we teach a room full of people to manage the entire Meraki stack, from security on down to MDM. And we do all of that in one 9 to 5 class. So think about that for a minute. I mean, that's impressive to be able to learn an entire stack of hardware, 4 different platforms, right? 4 different hardware or software platforms in a day, and be able to actually go out into the world and manage them just using the information you gained in that one session is really pretty impressive. And it speaks to just how easy it is to pick this stuff up and how intuitive the interface is. The content filtering is obviously a key piece of the value proposition when it comes to education. So we use Webroot's BrightCloud database for our content filtering. You can see an example of the interface on the right there. There's category-based, and then there's also specific patterns of URLs that you can block or whitelist. So you can block pornography, cheating, drugs, right, all that by category. And then you can go in and block specific sites, or you can whitelist sites that students or teachers may need to be able to get to, even though they're in one of the categories you've blocked. In addition to that, we also have SafeSearch enforcement for Google, Yahoo, and Bing. We have YouTube Education, or YouTube for Schools enforcement, where we will actually intercept the traffic and send it to your YouTube Education account rather than directly to YouTube, so that any traffic that under this device, that, let's say students are going out to YouTube, they reach the YouTube for Education account and they're able to access only videos that are approved under your YouTube for Education account. The other thing that we do here is that you actually have what we call group policies. And group policies are pretty much what they sound like. They're security, content filtering, and traffic and bandwidth policies that you can apply to different groups of users in your network. And you can apply them based on the VLAN, you can apply them based on specific users in dashboard, or you can apply them with Active Directory, which is a really powerful way to do it, because if you're using Active Directory in your school, when a student logs in and they're in the students group, they'll get the policy associated with the students group, and then if a teacher comes and logs in, they get the teacher policy, so on and so forth, into, let's say, a shared machine. The other thing you can do with this is you can actually apply these policies with our Systems Manager MDM, which I'm not going to get into too much, but basically based on tags or labels that you apply to Systems Manager MDM clients, so let's say iPads, a fleet of iPads owned by the school, you can actually apply policies to those devices based on the labels you've given. So if this device is owned by a person who should have a different policy than this other device owner, you can do that all in the MDM. So the application visibility and control is a key piece of kind of the Meraki story. This is something that we've done all the way back to our earliest days of doing just wireless, this AVC concept of being able to kind of monitor and control the traffic on the network, not just from a layer 3 perspective, but from an application perspective. So how do we accomplish that? Well, for one thing, we fingerprint all this user data, device data, application data, and we show it to you in dashboard. So we'll show you the device type, the OS, we'll show you application types, we'll show you where the traffic's going. With the new geo-IP feature in the MX, we'll actually show you what countries the network is communicating with and what types of traffic it's sending to those countries or receiving from those countries. Obviously, the content filtering. Intrusion detection and prevention is also natively offered using a SourceFire engine, which of course is a well-known and very trusted name in security. And now that they're part of Cisco as well, we've done some great work integrating our solutions. And the edge antivirus and anti-phishing that I mentioned earlier. You can do a lot of bandwidth controls, both globally and with those group policies, to make sure that no particular student or no particular user is really choking down the entire pipe. You make sure you have bandwidth available for critical applications. It's not all being used, let's say, for Netflix or for gaming or anything like that by students who happen to be on break or in the library, whatever it is. And you can also block traffic at layer 7. So in addition to the content filtering that's done for web browsing, you can also block applications. You can do things like blocking Skype or blocking particular applications that you specified. You can see an example here, blocking Flickr, blocking PhotoBucket, blocking Facebook. And this doesn't just block them from a browsing perspective, it blocks access to those resources. So things like the Facebook app, right, that might not be in a browser, but would still be calling out to Facebook. One great newer feature, and this is relatively recent, you can see an example of it here in this picture, is the topology feature. So this shows you your entire network topology based on LLDP data exchange between the devices. This will work if you have Meraki devices. It'll also work in many cases if you have some non-Meraki devices in your network that also speak LLDP. So it's a great kind of visualizing your network and drilling down into the particular parts that might be having issues sort of tool. And it's an example of the remote diagnostic and troubleshooting kind of tool set that's built into dashboard. So there are a lot of options here across wireless switching, security, MDM to go in and kind of figure out what's going wrong in the network. There's obviously logging, and there are also some tools, some dashboard tools that allow you to do things like ping, traceroute, do DNS checks, right, and see what might be going on in the network. We also have built-in alerting, which is, again, a pretty key thing to have that built into the dashboard. You don't have to set up a separate instance to alert you if a device goes down or to alert you if some unwanted thing, you run out of DHCP leases on a particular scope, things like that. You don't have to set up a monitor to do that with some third-party software. We have those alerts built into dashboard, and you can just enable them and have them sent to you, and the dashboard will automatically generate emails and send you alerts saying, hey, this device has been down for 6 minutes, or this device failed from its primary to its secondary uplink. All right, so now that I've talked you to death, let me show you some of the stuff that I've been talking about. So the first thing that I want to show you is actually the auto VPN feature. So if we go here, this, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is the Meraki dashboard, right? This is the Cisco Meraki dashboard. This is where you do all the management, all the monitoring, all the configuration of these devices. We'll come back to the clients page in a moment, because I do want to show you that as well. But since it was the first thing I really talked about that I'm going to demo, I want to make sure you see auto VPN. So I actually come from a background where I was a network administrator, network engineer in a past life, and I spent a lot of time configuring IPsec VPNs. Like too many hours of my life were spent doing this. So I'm incredibly fond of this feature because it makes that task so easy. So compared to most other devices where you'd either use command line or you'd use a wizard tool to configure VPN, here all you really do, our version of that wizard, is you go in here and you say, okay, I want to enable site-to-site VPN, either split or full tunnel, let's say split tunnel, and I will connect either to all of my other MXs and Z1s in this organization, and we'll talk about the Z1 very briefly a little later, but I want all of them to connect to each other in a mesh, or I want to say, okay, all of these satellites, let's say, are just going to talk back to main campus, and you select, right, your hub here for this hub and spoke topology. You can also add multiple hubs if there's more than one site that you want this spoke to connect to, and there's also built-in failover between those hubs that I won't really get into, but it's documented on our documentation website at docs.meraki.com. So if you're interested in that, that's a good place to look for more information on some of these features. So you say, okay, split tunnel, we'll do hub and spoke, select our hub, then we go down here and we click save. That's the entire IPsec setup. You do it on 2 MXs, you've got a tunnel up in about 15 seconds. So imagine this, especially at scale, when you're saving so much time and energy by being able to set up a VPN this quickly and this easily. Now, the one piece here that looks a lot scarier than it is because of how we have this network set up, we have a lot of routes here. These are just, you're selecting which subnets are interesting subnets for the VPN. So in most cases, you'd have anywhere between 1 and 8, I would say, of these, and you just say, okay, I want this one advertised or not advertised in the VPN. Down here at the bottom, you also have the ability to connect to non-Meraki peers. So if you want to use not AutoVPN, but standard IPsec to talk to something that's not a Meraki device, you can do that down here. And you can see we have an Azure instance configured. We actually have a preset for AWS and a preset for Azure, or you can set custom policies or use the Meraki default policy. And then you can configure over here in the availability section which of your networks is going to talk to this peer. So if you only have one particular site that should be talking to this instance, or if you have a set of sites or all of your sites, whatever it is, you can configure that here. So going back to the clients page, when I talk about traffic analytics and layer 7 analytics, this is where a lot of that data lives. So you look here and you see, okay, this is our network. This is actually our corporate network here in San Francisco, the Cisco San Francisco office. We see, okay, well, here's what's going on in the network over the course of the last day. These are all the different traffic types, the amount of usage, right? How we're grouping, what group we've put this traffic into. And we can see percent usage and all this stuff. And I can actually, you can see as I mouse over this, it highlights the portion of the graph above that is that type of traffic. And I can change the period on this to 2 hours, day, week, month. I can also see all the clients that have connected, and I can see whether they're wired clients or wireless clients, because this is a combined network, so we have security appliances, switches, and wireless devices all in this one network. So this guy is connected to an access point, right? Whereas this device here is connected to a switch, we can see, or possibly an MX, but most likely a switch. And we could see, our topology with that topology tool and kind of drill down to where all these devices might be. So here's our MX. Here's our switching, right? We have these switches here, and then we have our access points. And we can see how many clients. We can drill down to a particular one and see that device. So when we're looking at this traffic data, there's a lot of different things we can do. If we click this plus on the right side, we can add or remove columns to see more information about these devices, right? We can see users, we can see the VLAN they're on, we can see manufacturer of the device, we can see their wireless capabilities, all this different stuff we can do. We can also drill into a particular client, and we can see, okay, here's some information about this client, and that information will vary based on how they're connected. So if I were to grab a wired client, I'll actually see the switch port they're on, and I can see them I can pull the topology up here, I can see the device type, I can see policy information, so what group policy is applied to them. I can see details on what rules may be applied to them from a security and filtering perspective. I can see their IP address. I can set a fixed IP here for them in DHCP. I can add one-to-one NAT or port forwarding rules for them. I can ping the device to make sure that it's reachable and online. I don't know if this server actually responds to ping, so this may or may not get us anything. Yep, sure enough, 0% loss, 10 millisecond latency, and that'll ping a little bit just to give us, see now we've got still 0% loss, but a slight spike in latency. Now for this particular client, I can actually expand the traffic details and see what they've been doing. This one's a bad example because it's a server that's all reaching out to internal devices, so let's jump back to Andrew's laptop here. So some of these are blurred out because I'm in demo admin mode, but you would be able to see all these actual URLs. We can see what this user's been doing on the network, right? What this device has been doing on the network. And if we expand this, we can see more. We can also go over to the traffic analytics page to look at this not from a user perspective, but from a traffic type perspective, so kind of from the other side of this. And we'll give that a moment to load here. We can get to it from here as well. So if we go in here, see, okay, who's using Gmail? We click on Gmail, and we see, okay, here's all the Gmail traffic broken down by all of the client devices. Right, we can see these are all the devices that have been using Gmail. some information about these devices, the amount of Gmail traffic, and the portion of total Gmail traffic that they are. And then down at the very bottom, we can see, and again, some of these are blurred out, but we can see all of the destinations, the servers these devices are talking to that we've determined are Gmail, that they're sending or receiving Gmail traffic to or from. The final piece I want to show you here is group policies, just so you get an idea of what you can include in a group policy, and then we'll jump back into the presentation. So here you can see we've got quite a few policies configured. Most of these are example policies. Let's see, Common Core testing is a good one. So if we pull this up, we can see we can schedule this policy for certain times of day, certain days of the week. We can set bandwidth limits for any client affected by this policy. We can opt them out of hostname visibility. We can do firewall and traffic shaping rules that are specific to this group of users or this group of devices. Set layer 3 or layer 7 firewall rules, right? I want to block Amazon Instant Video just for this group of users. I want to set a bandwidth limit, or I want to set QoS settings for this group of devices. I can also do block website categories here. So in addition to the global settings for blocked website categories, we're going to block, adult and pornography and gambling across the whole network. But for this group of users, we're also going to block academic cheating. Let's say students is this group. We're going to block anything illegal. We're going to block abused drugs, alcohol and tobacco, right? We can do this, and this append setting here means that they will get the network-wide list and these categories on top of that. The other option is an override, so if you want to take it in the other direction, you can have a more strenuous or more stringent policy globally, and you can override it and say, well, this group of users only gets these two categories, even though the network-wide settings are more strict than this. You can also do the same thing with specific blocked patterns or specific whitelisted patterns. You can append or override them. YouTube for schools, if you enable it, you enter YouTube EDU ID, we'll enforce that. And then web search filtering, which is our term for safe search enforcement. So all of this can be applied at the group policy level, and those policies can be applied to particular clients, groups of clients, Active Directory groups, VLANs, and through the MDM. So it's really very flexible. All right, so let's jump back in to the slides here. So let's talk about the product line. Here's the lineup. These are the MX, and the Z1 is also sort of in the MX line, but these are the MX products that we sell. The 1660W are kind of the small unit. They're designed for up to about 25 client devices. And the 1660W are identical except for one thing, which is that the 60W has wireless. So the 60W is the one that's pictured there up at the top. You can see it's got those 3 radio antennas. The 60 looks exactly like that, but without the radio antennas. And other than that, they're pretty much identical. You get up into the 80 and 100, which is more mid-range, mid-size, up to about 100 and 500 client devices respectively. And then you get up into the 400 and 600, which are the larger campus or campus concentrator devices. Now, there's one thing on this slide that I want to clarify because it makes me kind of twitchy because it's misleading. If you look at the MX100, it shows under unique features gigabit uplinks. All of these devices have gigabit uplinks. So don't think that just because it says that the MX60 is, let's say, 100 meg only or something. They're all ports on all of these devices are gigabit capable. Now, if we go over to the Z1 on the right side, also fully gigabit capable, that's a little teleworker device. So that's more for work from home or like a particular, if you've got a scenario where you've got a particular student who's working, on their own project and they're, working kind of solo. This device is intended for 1 to 5 client devices, really 1 or 2 users who have up to about 5 devices between them, right? And it's got built-in wireless. It's actually quite strong wireless. Doesn't have a lot of the advanced security features, but it still has all the layer 7 application visibility. It's still managed from dashboard. It still does auto VPN and a lot of the same features of the MX. It just doesn't have some of the security features set because it's a smaller teleworker device. All of these devices support 3G, 4G offload. So that 3G, 4G USB modem that I mentioned, where you can fail over to cellular if your wired connection drops. Licensing. There's 2 licenses for the MX. It's kind of unique in this way among Meraki products. The enterprise license and the advanced security license. This isn't a cumulative licensing structure, it's either or. So you will either have enterprise or advanced security for your entire account. Enterprise is the base license. Advanced security includes the security features. Advanced security is far more common. I would say 85 to 90% of all customers have advanced security. It includes features that almost every customer wants or knows they're going to need in the future. So the difference is the advanced security license includes content filtering, safe search enforcement, YouTube for schools, intrusion prevention, antivirus and anti-phishing, and the geo-based firewalling, country-based firewalling, if should be clear. Enterprise includes all VMX features except for those ones listed on that right side. So that's the difference between the two. I mentioned several times we've got 3 other lines as well: MR, MS, and Systems Manager, which are the access point switches and MDM. These are all managed in the same interface. You may have noticed when I was looking through, when we were looking at dashboard, as I mentioned, that's combined network, contains MRs and MSs as well as the MX. It's all managed in one place, and things like topology and a few other features are kind of enhanced and complemented by having the full Meraki stack. So there are features, especially when you get into the MDM, that you can do more with when you're pairing Meraki with Meraki. So this being K-12 education, obviously, we want to talk about E-rate. So how does this work within the context of E-rate? Well, the hardware for all of our devices is 100% E-rate eligible. The licensing is 100% E-rate eligible for wireless, for switching, and for the MX enterprise license. The advanced security license is 50% E-rate eligible, which actually makes sense when you think about it, because the advanced security license is exactly double the cost. So the MX enterprise license being 100% E-rate eligible and the MX advanced security license being 50% equates to about the same amount of E-rate money being applied there. Systems Manager, unfortunately, the SME or Systems Manager Enterprise license is not E-rate eligible, but the base version of Systems Manager, which is free, obviously you don't have to worry about that. We sell our licensing in 1, 3, 5, 7, and 10-year increments, so you can only apply E-rate funds to the current year's license. So you can see some examples of this down at the bottom. I won't read through all of them, but I'll give you a minute to glance at that. Kind of gives you an idea of how the E-rate applies to the licensing as you extend it over multiple years. All right, so we actually have an offer for K through 12, that's specific to K through 12, that I want to talk to you about. And what this is K-12 schools and libraries get very significant discounts on 5-year licenses when they're being purchased with new hardware. So not renewals, but you're buying new hardware and associated licenses. And this is already effective and goes through beginning of July. Any E-rate eligible school and library can do this. With a couple of exceptions that you can see down at the bottom, and I believe you guys will be getting this slide at the end of the session, so you should be able to read through that. And it's available on, as you can see here, MR, MS, and MX licenses, and talk to your local reseller or your Meraki sales contact for more information on that. Why are we doing this? Well, we want to close that Wi-Fi gap. One of the big reasons we want to close the Wi-Fi gap that a lot of schools are kind of struggling with, and I think E-rate is a great way to do that. So we kind of want to complement that E-rate system with our own offering, and it allows you to kind of get around or work through the way that E-rate works with our licensing, right? By deeply discounting the licensing for a 5-year license, it pulls some of the sting out of the fact that the E-rate money can only be applied to the first year of that license, and allows you to kind of bridge that gap. So I've actually been informed by my lovely assistant Kat here that the slides and the recording are available on meraki.cisco.com/webinars. So if you want to see all of this in more detail, some of the eligibility and offer details, you can see that there. So what's next? Well, there's a few places you can go from here. One is you can do an evaluation. We do free trials and evaluations for all of our equipment, and that's at meraki.cisco.com/eval. So feel free to go through that process, get yourself some gear, try it out. Honestly, we are of the opinion that we want you to try it, right? The proof is in the pudding, as it were, and our stuff, really the value of the Meraki platforms shines when you start using it. So we want you to try it out because we think you'll love it as much as we do. We also have some great information on our blog. Our technical marketing team releases new blog posts pretty regularly, talking about new features, talking about new technologies, talking about enhancements to existing features, some of the things that we're doing with the portfolio. So that's at meraki.cisco.com/blog. And obviously, if you have any questions, contact your rep. To provide shipping information for your free AP, contact your rep. Any of that, meraki.cisco.com/contact. But remember, the information for your representative should also be in the webinar reminder. All right, thank you very much, and let's see what we've got. Kat usually doesn't leave a ton of questions for me, but we'll see what we've got here. Sure enough, she's answered pretty much all of them. Interesting comment here, that they look a lot like ASAs. I would disagree. I mean, I'm not sure if you mean functionally or if you mean physically. I would disagree physically. I think they're a very different kind of physical model than an ASA. Functionally, the ASA has been moving sort of in the UTM direction with some of the firepower services offering, some of the other features. So functionally, there is some similarity, although we do find that they kind of sit into different markets and they fit in different places and have different key competitors and some of that. So we found that there's not a ton of overlap, actually, working with the ASA team, which is great. It allows us to kind of work together to get stuff done. Great question. How does the IPS compare to devices like Palo Alto Networks? So I'm not personally super familiar with the IPS offering on a Palo Alto box, but I will tell you that, as a network ops, network security guy, prior to even my time at Meraki, I've always been a huge fan of SourceFire. I've always been very pro SourceFire. I think they do great work. I think they are a leader, if not the leader, in the security and IPS world, and we use their signatures and their technology natively on the box. So it's hard to beat that. And Joshua was asking if the devices play well with a Citrix environment. I don't know how to answer that question. It's such a broad question. We do have customers who use MX and other platforms of ours today and interoperate them with Citrix technologies, and I know they're doing that very successfully. If you have specific questions about that, absolutely reach out to your rep. They can get you in touch potentially with one of our systems engineers who can talk to you about specifics of what you're doing. VPN client software, there isn't a specific VPN client that we provide. You use the native operating system software. So Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android, all have built-in L2TP IPsec client VPN, and you use that to connect to the MX client VPN. Let's expand this so I can answer this other one here, if I can expand it. There we go. This is a great question. Something that actually I should have mentioned during the session, and I almost forgot. Question is on the MX80's recommended throughput changing. And the question is, well, why did the spec change? So I don't actually recall the MX80 being recommended for only 50 megabits per second. I don't recall that being the case, but it does bring up a good point, which is there's a document, and you can actually find it very easily. If you Google MX sizing guide, it is the first thing that pops up. This document here, the Meraki MX sizing guide, will kind of give you information on sizing these platforms, performance of these platforms, and most importantly, if you scroll down here, we have these real-world use cases, and 2 of them, as you can see, are K-12 focused. So these will tell you for a specific configuration. So we say, okay, we think a K-12 deployment with low bandwidth will likely have a configuration that's fairly similar to this in terms of the features they have turned on. High bandwidth will probably look more like this. And then we have this traffic distribution, and we send this actual traffic that's shown here. We send real-world traffic through these devices. We check performance, we check throughput, and we show you specifically for each product with this traffic distribution and these features turned on what the real-world throughput is. We're about to release a new revision of the sizing guide because we've actually made some very significant improvements in software to performance of some of these models. So be on the lookout for a new iteration of that, a new version of the sizing guide that will have newer information. But that's a great resource when you're trying to figure out what the right MX is for a particular scenario. All right. So that's all I've got question-wise. It looks like I'm going to be letting you guys go a little early. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you learned something useful. And I hope you'll trial some of our devices, check them out, and see what you think. Thanks, guys. All right.